All right, so talk to me just a little bit about, as we think about cybersecurity, people have, I guess, things conjure up in their mind of what that means. But maybe what are a couple of the misconceptions that, or debunk a couple of thoughts I think that people maybe associate with when they hear the word cybersecurity?
Sure. I mean, well, most of us are brought up on TV and Jack Bauer and 24 and those kind of things. And I think one of the big misconceptions is that every kind of breach is a big nation state operation with big data centers and TV screens everywhere. And the reality is most of this is done by individuals or small groups of people who have found ways to broadcast or try to reach as many people as they possibly can, just purely through numbers, right? If I can get enough people to click on something, I'll make some money. So I think that's the first one, is that it's like this nation state.
Yeah, so it's not no one's sitting in a room specifically targeting your organization, right? It's just they're targeting everything they can target, and the more they do, eventually something will hit.
Correct.
Right.
I mean, there is some targeting. You look at some hospitals, but the reality even there in the healthcare space is they're just hoping that somebody will click on something, and then they'll figure out what to do with it once you do it.
Right. We'll cross that bridge later.
Right. Yeah. Just somebody please click.
Yeah.
I think another misconception is that this is some deeply technical way of hacking into your system, and the reality is most of the time this happens because somebody clicks on something. The big portion of what people click on is what starts this process. And so oftentimes we don't pay enough attention to the social engineering aspect of cybercrime. We think it's just this technical thing that people are doing, but the reality is most of how they get there in the first place is through social engineering. Manipulating people to believe something or do something they wouldn't normally do.
And what we hear is phishing,
Correct.
right? People have heard that terminology, and that's what we're talking about. People are lobbying, in this case, emails into an organization because they figured out they've got an email list from somewhere, and they're emailing everybody, hoping somebody clicks on something, trying to make it look official and all those kinds of
pure law of numbers, right? If we can send out 10,000 emails and get one person to click, they can make money. So it's phishing is and phishing is just an acronym, right? It's the idea being that it's looking for a series of things, the ways you can identify an email. And if you want, I'll run through those. Just
well, and what are a couple of things people should do, right? And that's kind of the acronym, right? So like, what does that entail, or what does that look like?
Yeah. So if you get an email that has certain characteristics about it, right? So it usually has something personal. It's usually something that is got an urgent request to it. So in other words, I need you to do something right now. Most of the time it has a link or an attachment they want you to open. And if you see something like that and it seems out of the norm, and it has things like misspellings, or you don't recognize where it's coming from, you've got to be suspicious, right? And as I've said before, even if I get things from you, Reed, if you sent me a note kind of randomly that had an attachment, and I know who Reed is, and of course, why wouldn't I? I'm still going to question it anymore because there's so many ways around it. So unless you're specifically expecting something, you have to be more cautious.
That's interesting. I think. So you talk about the urgency as being part of the request, but sometimes it's the urgency on our own part on why we end up clicking on some of this stuff. We're just in a hurry. We're moving fast, and so if people could just slow down, think through it for a second. Was I expecting this? Does it look right? Some things like that.
Right. Why would somebody be asking me to log into my web email account? For what purpose? Now, they'll put something in there that makes you think it's critical, or we're about to lock your account or something.
Right.
But you really have to step back and ask yourself, have you ever seen this before?
Yeah.
And why would they send it this way?
Yeah, and pick up the phone and verify that this is something you're supposed to be doing. So
a credit card company is never going to send you an email and tell you your account's about to be locked. Click here to provide information. They're just not going to do that.
Right. Well, that's great feedback and good tips.